Picture handing a coworker one line: reconcile this quarter's spend. You step away for coffee, and by the time you're back, the spreadsheet is done, the formulas actually calculate, and the numbers reconcile. That's Claude Cowork. It doesn't answer you. It does the work. That's the whole shift away from an ordinary chat. A chat explains how to reconcile your spend. Cowork reconciles it. One hands you text and leaves the doing to you. The other hands you the finished file ready to use. Think before and after. Before: 10 browser tabs, copy-pasting numbers, wrestling a template for an hour. After: you describe the result you want once, and Claude coordinates every one of those steps for you while you do something else entirely. And this isn't only about coding. Cowork builds a client deck, turns a folder of contracts into a renewals tracker, or synthesizes messy research into a formatted document. It's a digital coworker for knowledge work, not just a tool for software. Hold on to one mental image for the whole course. You describe an outcome, Claude runs the steps, and you review and approve. That move, from chatting to genuinely delegating, is the single idea you need to get real value out of this. Under the hood, Cowork runs the same agentic architecture as Claude Code, the tool developers use, but with no terminal and no command line. All of that power to carry out multi-step tasks now reaches ordinary office work. No coding required. What does agentic mean? It means Claude doesn't just predict the next sentence. It reads your request, lays out a plan, breaks the work into steps, and executes real actions until it delivers a concrete output. It moves toward a goal, not toward a reply. The official tagline captures it. Describe an outcome, step away, and come back to finished work. That finished work might be a formatted document, a set of organized files, or research already synthesized for you. Real outputs, not drafts you still have to assemble. Here's what matters most. Cowork is built for knowledge work, not just software development. It shares an engine with Claude Code, but its target is the business and content tasks that fill your week, the ones that eat hours yet follow a clear process. And unlike an assistant that waits for your next instruction, Cowork is designed to work autonomously inside the limits you set. You define the outcome and the permissions. Claude handles the execution step by step until it's done. It's worth cleanly separating two modes that now live in the same place: chat and Cowork. Chat is conversation. Questions, answers, ideas, explanations. Cowork is execution. It takes a multi-step task and produces real deliverables you can download. On web and desktop, chat and Cowork now share one home, one sidebar, one search, and a single place where your projects and artifacts live. You're not switching apps. You're choosing the mode that fits what you need in the moment. Here's a rule that trips people up. Memory does not carry over from chat to Cowork. What you told the chat isn't automatically known by your Cowork task. The one exception is projects, where context does persist and gets shared across tasks. So if you start something in chat and want Cowork to run with it, restate the context you need inside the task itself. Treat them as two rooms under one roof that don't share a brain, unless you're inside a project. That distinction saves you real confusion. There's a cost to know upfront. Cowork uses more of your usage quota than chatting does. That makes sense, since a multi-step task runs code, coordinates subtasks, and processes far more tokens than a single chat reply ever would. The practical takeaway: use chat to think, explore, and draft fast. Save Cowork for the heavy work you want fully handled. Picking the right mode for each job is the first thing that separates an expert user from a beginner. Here's the stat that reframes everything. More than 90% of Cowork usage is not software development. The overwhelming majority is business operations and content creation. You do not need to know how to code to get enormous value from this. First real operations example: reconciling a quarter's spend. You connect the sheets and reports, and Claude cross-checks figures, flags the gaps, and hands back a clean summary. What used to eat an afternoon is ready while you handle something else. Second example: turning a folder of contracts into a renewals tracker. Claude reads each contract, pulls the key dates and terms, and builds a table of what's expiring when. A pile of loose files becomes a single actionable dashboard. Third example, this one content creation, building a client deck from call transcripts. Claude reads what was actually said, finds the themes, and assembles a structured presentation. We'll come back to this exact case in detail because it's perfect for seeing the full flow. See the pattern? Every one of these is multi-step, repetitive, and follows a clear logic, yet it steals your hours. That's precisely Cowork's turf. Processes a capable human could do, but that you'd rather delegate so you can focus on what actually needs your judgment. Think about your own week. Which report do you build the same way every time? Which folder do you comb through file by file? Which deck do you rebuild every month with fresh numbers? Each of those answers is a prime candidate for your first Cowork task. Before you launch that first task, check 3 requirements. First, you need a paid subscription. Cowork is available on the Pro, Max, Team, and Enterprise plans. It's not on the free tier because running whole tasks end-to-end demands far more compute. The second requirement applies if you want Claude to touch your local files or browser. You need the Claude desktop app open and connected. The third is obvious but essential. A stable internet connection for the whole session, since the work runs in the cloud. On platforms, you have 3 doors in. Desktop, on macOS and Windows, through the Claude desktop app. It's the only one with full access to your local files and browser. It's the most powerful experience for serious work on your own documents. The second door is the web at claude.ai, straight from your browser. The third is mobile, with the iOS and Android apps on their latest versions. Web and mobile are mainly for launching and managing tasks, not for reaching into local files. One note on rollout. As this is recorded, Cowork is in beta on web and mobile, releasing over a period of weeks starting with the Max plan, then the others. If you don't see it in your account yet, it's simply a matter of time. To sum up this part, a paid plan, plus the desktop app if you'll work with local files, plus internet. With that covered, you have everything you need to open Claude and give it your first task. Let's walk through exactly that. Launching a task is simpler than you'd expect. Step 1. Open Claude. On web, desktop, or mobile, it doesn't matter which you start from. It all begins in the same familiar spot where you normally type your messages. There's no separate app to install, no hidden panel. Step 2. In the message box, select the Cowork mode. This is the switch that tells Claude you don't want a conversational reply. You want it to carry out a full task. That one gesture is what separates chatting from delegating. Step 3. Describe the task clearly. Instead of a question, give it an assignment. What you want to achieve, with which materials, and how the finished result should look. The more concrete you are about the outcome, the better the plan Claude will prepare. Step 4. And don't skip this one. Review the plan Claude proposes before you let it run. Claude shows you its approach, the steps it intends to take. Read it, adjust it if needed, and only then give it the green light. That's it. Select Cowork, describe, review the plan, and let go. 4 steps. From there, Claude takes over the execution and you shift from operator to supervisor. Let's look at exactly what happens under the hood once you give that approval. Once you accept the plan, what we call the task loop kicks in. Understanding it gives you real control over what's happening. It has 5 stages, and Claude moves through them transparently, so you never lose sight of what it's doing. Stage 1. Claude analyzes your request and creates a plan. It doesn't fire off actions blindly. It turns the goal into a strategy first. Stage 2. If the work is complex, it breaks that goal into smaller, manageable subtasks it can tackle one at a time. Stage 3, and here's the magic. Claude runs code and shell commands in an isolated environment, hosted on Anthropic's servers. Nothing runs on your machine. That environment is its private workshop, where it processes, calculates, and builds. Stage 4. When it helps, Claude coordinates several work streams in parallel. These are sub-agents working at once on different parts of the problem, like a small team under one direction. That speeds up large tasks dramatically compared to doing them in sequence. Stage 5. Claude delivers the outputs to your session, where you can preview and download them. The result doesn't stay locked in the workshop. It lands right in front of you, ready to review, open, and put to work immediately. Memorize those 5 stages: plan, split, run isolated, parallelize, and deliver. It's the heartbeat of every Cowork task. When you know which stage Claude is in, you know exactly when to look, when to step in, and when to simply wait for the result. Let's ground all of this in one complete, concrete case. You've got a folder full of call transcripts with a client, weeks of meetings sitting in text files. Your assignment? Turn that mess into a clean presentation deck for the next meeting. You start by opening Claude in the desktop app, because the work lives in your local folder. You select Cowork mode and connect that folder of transcripts. With that, Claude can read the files directly, with no need for you to upload them one by one. Then you describe the outcome precisely. Read every transcript in this folder, identify the main themes and decisions per meeting, and build a PowerPoint with an executive summary, one theme per slide, and next steps at the end. Specific in, specific out. Claude doesn't dive in immediately. First, it hands you a plan. Read and group the transcripts, extract the recurring themes, order the decisions by date, then build the deck to a defined structure. You read that plan and confirm it's exactly what you meant. Once you approve, the loop begins. Claude splits the work into subtasks. One read-through to understand each call, another to group themes across meetings, another to draft the content for each slide. You can watch those steps take shape in order. As it works, Claude shows progress indicators: which file it's reading, which theme it's consolidating. It's not a black box. If you notice it's overweighting one minor meeting, you can step in mid-task and steer it, without restarting from scratch. All the building happens in that isolated environment on Anthropic servers. There, Claude assembles the PowerPoint file. It creates the slides, writes the titles, orders the bullet points. Your computer doesn't do the heavy lifting, it just waits for the deliverable. When it finishes, the deck shows up in your session to preview. You open it right there, review it slide by slide, and see whether the narrative flows. Something missing? A section too many? You note the changes without leaving the session, with the result in front of you. This is where a feature you'll love comes in: in-place editing. On an output like a document, you highlight the text you want to change, choose Edit with Claude, and type your request. You retune a paragraph's tone or fix a figure without redoing anything from scratch. Once the deck convinces you, you download it and it's ready for your meeting. Replay what happened. You connected a folder, described an outcome, approved a plan, Claude executed in parallel and isolated, you reviewed and edited, and you downloaded the deliverable. That's the full co-workflow. That case leaned on a core desktop capability: connecting folders. When you grant access to a local folder, Claude reads and writes files there directly, with no manual uploads or downloads. It works on your real documents, in place, like a colleague with access to the shared drive. This kills the most annoying friction in working with AI: the upload a file, copy the answer, paste it, export it, shuffle. With connected folders, your documents and the results live in the same spot on disk where you already organize your work. There's a powerful tool tied to this: folder instructions. When you select a local folder, you can give it project-specific context: what the files contain, which conventions you follow, and what Claude should and shouldn't touch inside it. For instance, in your contracts folder, you might note that dates use day-month-year format, or that drafts are never overwritten. Claude reads those instructions and honors those rules on every task it runs against that folder. The context travels with the folder. And here's the clever part: Claude can update those folder instructions during the session. If it discovers a useful pattern, or you clarify something new, that learning gets written down for next time. The folder gets smarter with every use. Let's return to what you see while Claude works, because live control is key. First, progress indicators. At every moment, Claude shows which action it's running right now, so you're never left staring at a spinner with no idea what's happening. Second, transparency. Claude surfaces its reasoning as it goes. You can see why it chose a path, what it assumed, what it prioritized. That window into its logic is what lets you trust the result, and catch it early if it misread something. Third, and this is powerful, you can steer the task midway. If you see it heading the wrong direction, you step in and correct course without canceling and starting over. It's a conversation in motion, not a fire and pray button. Fourth, check in from any surface. You can open the same session on another device and see how it's going. Start on the desktop, glance at it from your phone in the hallway, and pick up where you were. The task isn't chained to the screen it was born on. Fifth, remember that when it helps, several subagents are working in parallel under one coordination. What you see on screen may be the combined progress of several simultaneous lines of work, not one slow step-by-step sequence. That parallel effort is exactly why a big task can finish faster than you'd expect. And sixth, a protection that brings peace of mind. Before deleting anything permanently, Claude asks for your explicit permission. It won't irreversibly remove files on its own. That guardrail is always in place, even if you've given it plenty of freedom for everything else. Now, the most important part of all, permissions and security. Getting this right is what separates using Cowork with confidence from using it with fear. Let's start with the central choice you make on every task: how much autonomy you give Claude to act. There are two permission modes. The first is ask before acting. With it, Claude pauses and asks for your approval before touching sensitive files or using a new tool. You approve each delicate step. Maximum control, a more measured pace. The second mode is act without asking. Here, Claude works straight through, without pausing at every step, which is ideal for long tasks where you don't want to approve things constantly. In exchange, you trade immediate control for speed. So, what about security in that looser mode? Before executing, a classifier screens for prompt injection attempts. Prompt injection is when malicious text, hidden in a file or a web page, tries to slip hidden orders to Claude. That filter blocks them before anything runs. On access to your data, the rule is strict and clear. Claude only reads and writes in the folders you connected. Nothing beyond that. If you didn't give it access to a folder, that folder doesn't exist as far as Claude is concerned. You draw the perimeter. Network access follows your egress settings, your outbound rules. And web fetch works server-side only. It's limited to search results and the URLs you share, not free reign to browse the internet on your behalf. The reach is deliberately narrow. If you're on Team or Enterprise, there's one more layer. Admins can switch off web search entirely from the organization settings, under Capabilities. So control doesn't rest with the individual user alone, it also lives in company policy. That leaves the pillar of isolation. All of Claude's work runs in an isolated environment on Anthropic's servers, separate from your computer. But understand precisely what it protects. Isolation shields your machine from whatever happens inside that environment. And here's the nuance you can't get wrong. Isolation does not change what Claude can read or do with the access you gave it. If you connected a folder of sensitive data, isolation doesn't hide it. Your first line of defense is always the permissions and the folders you choose to connect. Beyond per-task permissions, you can set permanent rules with global instructions. These are preferences Claude applies across all your Cowork tasks, so you don't repeat them every time. Think of them as your way of working, written down once. To edit them, go to Settings, open the Cowork section, and click Edit next to Global Instructions. Type your rules and save with Save. In seconds, you've locked in how you want Claude to work by default in every session. What belongs there? Things like the tone of your documents, your preferred date format, what it should never do without asking, or how to name output files. Global instructions turn your repeated preferences into automatic behavior, so you set them once and stop restating them in every task. When a task stops being one-off and becomes recurring, it's time to use projects. A project is a persistent workspace that groups related tasks under one umbrella, with all their context gathered in a single place instead of scattered across separate, forgetful sessions. Each project has its own files, its own context, its own instructions, and here's the valuable part, its own persistent memory. Unlike a loose task, a project remembers. What Claude learned last week is still there the next. Remember how memory doesn't carry from chat to Cowork? Projects are the big exception. Inside a project, context is preserved and shared across tasks. That's why they're the natural home for the work you repeat every week or every month. An example, a project called Monthly Report Client X, with its templates, its historical data, and the instruction for how you like the summary. Each month, you just bring the new numbers, and Claude already knows everything else. Context stops getting rebuilt from zero. To extend what Claude can do, there are plugins. A plugin is a package that bundles three things into a single install: skills, connectors, and subagents. Instead of configuring loose pieces, you enable one plugin and bring all that capability in at once. Let's break down what's inside. Skills are specialized abilities for specific tasks. Connectors link Claude to external tools and data sources. And subagents are helpers that can take on specific parts of the work in parallel under Claude's coordination. During a Cowork session, you reach plugins from the left sidebar. They're right there to add capability as the task demands, without leaving your flow or interrupting whatever Claude is currently doing. You equip what the job needs, when it needs it, and set the rest aside. The underlying idea is that Cowork is extensible. You're not limited to what ships out of the box. You can equip Claude with skill packages built for your kind of work, tuning its fit to your processes more and more over time. Let's talk about what Claude hands you, because the quality of the outputs is what makes Cowork useful. It doesn't generate plain text you then have to format. It produces professional artifacts ready to use in a real work setting. For example, Excel spreadsheets with formulas that genuinely work, not numbers pasted as text. Ask for a spend model and the cells calculate, the totals update. You get a living tool, not a photo of a table. It also builds complete PowerPoint presentations and carefully formatted documents, headings, sections, consistent styling. What would normally cost you hours of layout arrives already structured, in the format you'll actually use to share or present. That's the difference between a draft and a deliverable. And for touch-ups without a redo, there's in-place editing. You highlight the piece of text you want changed, choose Edit with Claude, and type what you want. Claude adjusts just that fragment, leaving the rest untouched. It's precise surgery on the document, not a full rebuild. This changes how you iterate. Instead of asking to redo the whole thing and crossing your fingers, you point at exactly what to improve and improve it instantly. Refining an output becomes fast, surgical, and free of the fear of breaking what already worked. Now a feature that takes delegation to the next level: scheduled tasks. You can not only ask Claude to do something now, you can ask it to do it on its own, on a schedule, recurring. The work runs without you present at all. There are two ways to create one. Inside a Cowork task, you type the schedule command, or you click Scheduled in the sidebar. Either one lets you define what runs and how often, from a daily briefing to a weekly report you never have to trigger by hand. Here's the striking part. These tasks run remotely. They don't need your computer on. They execute in the cloud, on their schedule, even if your laptop is closed, powered off, or zipped in your bag. The work happens with none of your devices online. The official example illustrates it perfectly. A client prep for Monday at 6 in the morning. Claude works through the emails, the transcripts, and the relevant news, assembles the briefing document, and leaves the follow-up email drafted without sending it. Notice that last detail. It leaves it drafted but doesn't send. The irreversible action, sending the email, stays with you. You walk in Monday, and instead of starting from zero, you find the work done and one final decision waiting for your sign-off. All of this takes on another dimension with what's new on web and mobile, which turn Cowork into something that works for you no matter where you are. The centerpiece is background execution, and it completely changes your relationship with long tasks. Background execution means the work continues even after you close the laptop. You launch a heavy task, lower the lid, and head to your meeting. Claude keeps going in the cloud. When you come back, the progress is there, not frozen where you left it. We saw it with scheduled tasks, but it's worth repeating here. They run with no device online. Neither your computer nor your phone has to be on or connected. The cloud handles it alone. On the schedule you set, no exceptions. Then something very human appears, human in the loop. When Claude reaches a decision only you can make, It doesn't guess and it doesn't stall. It asks. And that question reaches your phone, wherever you are, so you can answer and the work keeps moving. This enables handoff across devices. You start a task on the desktop, review it from your phone as you walk, and pick up the finished output wherever suits you. One task flows with you from screen to screen. No breaks, no restarts. That said, be clear on each surface's role. Desktop is the full experience. It's the only one with access to your local files and browser. Web and mobile focus on managing tasks, launching, reviewing, approving, and collecting results from anywhere. And holding it all together, the unified home. Chat and Cowork share one home. Your projects and artifacts live together in a single, coherent place. You jump from chatting to executing, from one device to another, without ever losing the thread of your work. With the full picture in hand, let's cover how to steer multi-step agentic work well, because the tool performs according to how you guide it. First practice, the most important. Be specific about the outcome. Don't describe the task. Describe what the finished deliverable looks like. Instead of "help me with the expenses," say, generate an Excel sheet with one row per vendor, columns by month, and a totals row with formulas. The sharper the destination, the more accurate the plan, and the fewer corrections you'll need. Second practice. Always review the plan before you release the task. That half-minute of reading is your greatest point of leverage. Correcting course in the plan costs a moment. Correcting it after the task has already run blind costs far more. Third, connect only what the task needs. Don't hand over your whole drive if the work lives in one folder. A tight perimeter is safer, and it also focuses Claude on the right files without distracting it with the irrelevant. Fourth, choose the permission mode that matches the risk. For delicate tasks or sensitive data, use ask before acting and approve step by step. For repetitive, low-risk work, act without asking. Saves you friction. Fit the leash to the task, not the other way around. Fifth, use projects for recurring work. If you're going to repeat something every week or month, don't start from scratch each time. Set up a project with its context and instructions, and let persistent memory do the heavy lifting of remembering for you. An expert also knows the limits of the tool, so let's be honest about what Cowork doesn't do yet. First, you know this one. Memory doesn't carry from chat to Cowork. Outside of a project, each task starts without recalling your earlier conversations. Second, Cowork sessions can't be shared. You can't hand a colleague a link to a session for them to watch or continue. If you need to collaborate, you'll share the downloaded outputs, not the live session itself. Third, some features are desktop only, like live artifacts and local MCP servers. Web and mobile are great for managing, but for certain advanced capabilities, you'll need the desktop app. Keep that in mind when you plan where to work. Fourth, a practical reminder on consumption. Cowork spends more of your quota than chatting. Reserve it for work that genuinely benefits from full execution, and don't burn it on simple questions a regular chat answers at a fraction of the cost. And a note for teams. For now, Cowork activity isn't yet captured in the Compliance API. If you work in an environment with strict audit requirements, factor that in when deciding which tasks to delegate and how you document their results. Want to go deeper? Anthropic has an official course, Introduction to Claude Cowork, covering the task loop, plugins and skills, file and research workflows, and how to steer multi-step work responsibly. Pair it with the official support docs for getting started with Claude Cowork. Let's recap the whole path in concrete steps you can follow right now. 1. Open Claude and in the message box, select Cowork mode. 2. If you'll work with local files, do it from the desktop app and connect the folder you need. 3. Describe the outcome you want in as much detail as possible, aiming at the final deliverable. 4. Review the plan Claude proposes and adjust it before giving the green light. That review is your moment of maximum control over the entire task. 5. Choose the permission mode by risk. Ask before acting for the delicate. Act without asking for the routine. 6. While Claude works, follow the progress, check its reasoning, and step in midway if it needs steering back toward what you're after. 7. Preview the output, refine it with in-place editing, and download it when it convinces you. And for anything recurring, save it all in a project or schedule it with our schedule, so the work repeats on its own without you launching it again. With that, you've gone from zero to expert in the co-work flow. You know what it is, how it differs from chat, how to launch a task, how to lock down permissions and security, and how to leave scheduled work running on its own. The real practice starts with your own files. So the question is yours to answer. Of everything you do in a week, which repetitive, multi-step task would you most love to never do by hand again? That one, that exact one, is the first you should hand off to Cowork today.